Hello, this is David Langford. Today we're going to talk about the London Knights and the Niagara Ice Dogs that started the OHL final on Thursday. I'm with my colleagues Morris Delacosta and Ryan Pyatt. Lots to talk about, guys. This is the biggest series for the London Knights for sure since 2006. What makes it so big, Ryan?
Well, I think the team won the Memorial Cup in 2005, and that's been the judgment of this team. Every team that's come along, they've compared it to the Corey Perry team and the Danny Syvret team. And the team after that, the 06 team, lost in the final, and it's been a long road back. The Knights have come close. In 09, they had the 5 overtime series against Windsor, and they loaded up and didn't get it. This is their first time back. It was a year they weren't expected to be here, but they're here, and if they don't win, it'll be an opportunity wasted, even though they've had a very good year.
Morris, it's an interesting coaching matchup with a fill-in coach, so to speak, in Mark Hunter, and Marty Williamson's been around for quite a while. What do you think of that coaching matchup, and would it have been any different with Dale here rather than Mark?
Well, I think nobody gives Mark very much credit for his coaching ability because he's coached really at a lot of levels except at the NHL level. He's coached pro teams, he's coached junior teams, he's coached for a lot of years and just prefers to go into the general manager mode. I think Williamson's a great coach. He's proved that he's had more than one successful team, and he does a fair amount of winning. But like the Knights, he has to win the big one. The Knights have won a number of Western Conference championships, a number of Midwestern Conference championships. But their judgment will be on when they're eventually going to win another Memorial Cup or another OHL championship. So I like the coaching matchup. I think Williamson and Hunter, and I don't think it would have made any difference if Dale was here or not. Right. I think they're both very good coaches.
Ryan, another interesting matchup is the goaltending. Visentin for Niagara and Hauser from London. I mean, they can't get probably the two best goalies in the OHL. How does that matchup look to you?
Well, I think it's more fuel for Michael Hauser's fire. I mean, Mark Visentin is, again, like Jack Campbell and John Gibson, everything that Hauser wanted to be. He was a 2-time world junior goalie. He's a first-round NHL pick of the Phoenix Coyotes. He had set the record for the most shutouts in the OHL this year, and he went for like 5 months without giving up more than like 2 goals. And he had a tremendous year. And of course, everybody knows Mark Visentin for the failures of the past 2 Canadian World Junior teams. But in this league, he's second to none, and Hauser's starting to get. People are starting to realize and starting to give him the credit that he deserves. And he had 46 wins this year, and it's a tremendous goaltending matchup.
Another interesting thing with this matchup is the arenas, Morris. London's got sort of the state-of-the-art type arena, and Jack Gatecliff Arena in St. Catharines is back, and it's a smaller ice surface, about 15 feet shorter. What does that play? Does that give them more of a distinct home advantage to each team to play at home?
I don't buy that. I don't buy that there's any distinct advantage other than atmosphere. I don't think the ice surface has any play in it at all. I think that if you know how to play the game, you can play in a small rink, you can play in a big rink. It all comes down to goaltending, number one. You stop the shots. More shots, you're going to win. Comes down to good defense and being able to play a disciplined game. So, to me, ice surface doesn't make any difference in that. I think it's a convenient excuse, but teams that have got here, teams that are making OHL championship series, they've obviously known how to play in all sorts of ice surfaces. I don't think it means anything.
The defense is an interesting matchup too, Ryan. London's been considered to have this big stud defense team, but how does a matchup go with defense versus defense on the two teams?
Well, the Ice Dogs have the best defenseman in the league, Dougie Hamilton. The Boston Bruins pick. He was just named the top blue liner in the league. The Knights come at you with a little more depth, I think, at the back end in the Ice Dogs. And they scored 14 goals during the regular season. They have 9 in the playoffs, and a lot of that can be attributed to Olli Määttä, who's I think is rising up the ranks in the NHL draft. The mind of some people, he's been all over the board, but I think he'll be a first rounder. And I think the way he played against Kitchener, and if he continues that against Niagara, that really looks well for him in June. And he was just named the player of the week, and he scored against Kitchener when they needed him. He had the big 2 goals in 22 seconds, and that's a big credit to Rob Ramage, who's worked with them all year. That's who Mark Hunter gives the credit for turning around this defense. I think the edge goes to the Knights.
Morris, let's go just slightly on the history, because it's interesting. I, several million years ago, covered a series between the Finn Cups and the Knights, including Pat Regan and Dale McCourt and so on and so forth. Is there a fairly current history or not? Or is it's sort of out the window, that old history doesn't mean much?
No, I don't think the old history means very much. I mean, the players are different, the coaches are different, different styles of play, players from a different era. You can't do half the stuff you used to do when the famous Finn Cups, of course, were there, where, they played out of Hamilton. And
Bramley, Burt, Temple.
Yeah, that's right. And you used to get the Hamilton flu quite a bit. I'll always remember a story that Sherry Basson told about that. Just at the last game of the season on that team, he had that won 5 games, and he showed up to go on the bus to go to Hamilton, and there were 12 players there. And he asked the trainer, where was everybody? He said, they've all got the flu. So, but that was years ago. You can't do that anymore. So I think more than anything, the only historical thing will be the pressure on both teams to produce and finally win a championship. After being close for a number of years, especially Williamson. Had a great team in Barrie that didn't make it as far as they were supposed to make it, and the Knights, as we mentioned, have done really well, but have only claimed one Ontario Hockey League championship. So
history is now.
That's the history, exactly.
But I will say, I will just add to that. I've been to the Gatecliff Arena the last couple of years, and the fans, that history isn't among the players, but the fans, they still hate the Knights. They get very good crowds when London's in there for their one visit per year, and they remember those. Like a lot of obviously in junior hockey, a lot of the fans are a little older. In a place like St. Catharines, you get your 50, 60-year-old people going to the games, and they still remember they said, where's Don Brankley at the games, and that I think that's still, like, there is a bit of healthy hate in there, which is great to see.
We haven't talked about the forwards, and one thing you brought up when we were chatting earlier was about the overage matchup. Could you go through that with us?
Yeah, well, I don't know. This might be some sort of record, but Niagara's their 3 overage forwards. They produced 23 goals in the first 15 playoff games, and you compare that to the Knights, who only have 1 overager player playing right now, Brett Cook, and he's a kind of a defensive defenseman, and they got 0. So that's a big. Morris, that's something that the Knights have to find a way to get goals out of guys like Tyler Fairley in the defense and that checking line, the Chris Tierney checking line, because you got Agazino Pecan and Alex Friesen, who kind of plays like an older version of the Ruperts, and they got 8 and 7 goals, and that's a lot to make up for the young Knights team.
And you talked about depth on the defense. So the reality is that if you look for depth on scoring, I think Niagara Falls has it over London, but I think it goes much more than that. I think right now London is getting getting great depth play from everybody, although not everybody's producing goals, and I think this is where they get somebody like Greg McKegg to come, who's now healthy. They need him to produce, because that's where they need to produce some goals from.
Just before we let you go, Morris, a quick prediction.
Well, I think it'll be Niagara Falls in 6 or 7.
Yeah. And Ryan?
Well, I'll go with the homer pick to oppose Morris, and I'll say the Knights do it, and I'll say they do it in 7. They can't do it in 8 the way Danny Eastman did back in '77, which everyone remembers in overtime, because there wasn't, and the Gardens aren't around anymore. But they'll do it in 7.
Okay. Well, I don't know enough to split the difference, so I'm going to let them go 1-1. Anyway, for London Free Press, Morris Delacosta, Ryan Pyatt, I'm David Langford. Thanks.